Do you ever feel that gap between knowing that your consulting or coaching adds tremendous value to your clients and being able to articulate that value, let alone quantify it? Well, you won't be after you tune into today's episode of the Consulting Matters podcast. And welcome to the Consulting Matters podcast. This is the show for purpose driven consultants and coaches who are ready to own the power of what they do and position themselves for the clients, the impact, the income they're ready for. I'm your host, Betsy Jordan, and I am both a business mentor and a brand messaging and positioning strategist. So you can find out all the different ways that I help my clients make more money through making a bigger difference on my website at www.betsyjordan.com. And don't forget, Jordan's with a Y. So today, on the show, we're not just talking about getting clear on the value of what you do, we're getting into quantifying that value and making that value clear, credible, and compelling to the clients you're trying to land. And for this reason, I am super excited to have on the show Jack Phillips. So, Jack is literally the leading expert on this. He is the author of a ton of books, literally a ton of books. He's the founder of the ROI Institute, and his methodology is a proven approach for showing the value of what we do and the return our clients get from working with us. So I met Jack back in 1999 when he taught the ROI workshop to my organization development team at Disney. And this framework, this perspective, this mindset has had a profound impact on what I did to position myself more strategically as a consultant and what I do now to help other consultants and coaches position themselves more strategically in the market and with their clients. So, in this episode, you're going to learn how to use the ROI framework to connect the dots between the work you do, which may feel at first glance soft, to the hard and tangible outcomes that your clients care about. And if you're trying to learn how to speak the language of business, this is a very quick practical hack. So it's powerful in so many different ways. So before we dive in, I just want to give you a really quick heads up. I am launching a brand new group coaching program. It's called the Impact and Income Accelerator. I'm super excited about it. It's an 8-week group coaching program where you're going to learn how to take the ROI mindset and the skills that you're going to learn more about in this episode straight into your client conversation so that you can land bigger and higher paying engagements with greater ease, starting with your very next client opportunity. So there's early bird pricing now. There's lots of deals. So head on over to my website at betsyjordan.com/accelerator to learn more. So now let's get into the show. Welcome, 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 Jack. I am so excited to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I know your work from back in, no, what, 1999 when you came into my organization development team and introduced me to the ROI model, which has been transformational in my approach to consulting and really the foundation of a lot of what I do. But I know there's a lot of people who are listening who aren't familiar 100% with all of your work, and I was wondering if we could just start off with a little bit about your background and how you became a measurement of projects and programs.
Okay, good. Started off as an engineer, and I joined a company called Lockheed. Now it's called Lockheed Martin. But I had an opportunity quickly to move into the learning and development space, and I did that. So I was an electrical engineer, uh, and I got into learning. What I liked about that is that you really had a chance to influence more people there. In a big company, we had a building, if you can imagine, with 15,000 engineers, and we're all in cubicles. We're doing a small part to a big project. So, and your sphere of communication and influence is pretty small. And so I like the idea of teaching others and teaching other engineers. And so I made that switch and then worked around the different areas in the learning area. And I had this particular interesting challenge. Um, I was I was managing their co-op program. This is a cooperative education program. This is where you alternate college and work, a semester at campus, a semester at work. So we had these co-op students, like 350 a year. I mean, that is any given time, 350 co-op students. Half of them were at work and the other half were on campus. That's a lot of people. And by the way, we paid for them in my salary as a co-op director because the department where they were working didn't want to absorb this program cost because in their mind, that's kind of welfare for the students, not work for the department. So you can imagine I had a pretty big budget. And what I did was transfer that budget to our chief engineer. My whole expense for the department, for all those salaries, my salary and my assistant, and my travel to 16 universities to recruit these people, all of that transferred to the chief engineer. So one day he called me and says, "So Jack, I noticed that we get a pretty big bill from you every month, and I know it's for the co-op program, and I know it's a great program, but uh, can you show me the value that delivers for us? Because there's a and right now we're not really recruiting very much. We're actually cutting budgets, and maybe we don't need this so much. Can you show me the value for this? And could you actually show me the ROI for us having this? Because I got the cost in front of me right now. I'm looking at that. That's a big cost. So can you tell me the monetary benefits we're getting out of this? Show me the ROI. I never had
Huh.
that request. Now, fortunately, I was working on a master's degree in statistics at the time, and I needed a master's thesis. You know how that is.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, just as he's telling me that, I said, I think I could probably show you the value of this program. Could you give me about 6 months? He says, no, no. I mean, why do you need 6 months? I said, I got to do some analysis. Well, that don't take 6 months. Quick. I mean, I've got some decisions to make on budget share. How about you do it next week? I said, no. I said, how about give me a month maybe? He said, okay. So that's not much time, but to him that was a lot of time. And so I went to my thesis advisor and said, look, I got a project here. What do you think? He said, sounds great to me. We did it. Now fast forward, it showed we did add value. Hey, it was the people who came to that program had much higher tenure. That is, it's a way to keep people. They progress in the organization more than others, um, and they contribute more. So they stay with us, they perform, and when you put all that together, it's worth it.
It's
And so,
fascinating. So it's like you just responded to the actual question, but then
yeah,
the question came at an opportune time because you were at school and you were getting your master's degree
yeah,
and all of these it was like a perfect storm of situations that came
yeah,
together for you.
yes. And so what happened when I left? I showed my results to the chief engineer and his division engineers. And I was, in my early 20s at that point, and still so young and frightened just the notion of what I'm doing. And so, uh, when I got through with that presentation, I showed them some things that wasn't working as well. Process improvement opportunity. Like, when they get in their senior year, you should put them on some projects that can show their contribution and help you contribute. Quit having them make copies and coffee for you, all the time like this. So And so he turned to his group and says, "So," he turned to his division engineers and says, "I think we'll keep this program." Now, he hadn't said that very bluntly like that, and he says, "Jack just talked to us about how we can make this thing better. Let's make this even a better program. And let's consider Jack a business partner to us because welcome him into your division and let's work with him. He just got some great data for us here." So I left that meeting and said, this is pretty good. I've got my budget. I've got a better program now, and I got some people who are great contacts for me. By the way, it wasn't much later. I was director of the advanced technology training for that company, and I needed these people, and they knew me. So those partners turned out quite well for me. And so I said, "Hey, this is good. We got to do more of this." And so we began to put structure around this. How do you make it work? Um, and look we had a large training function. We had 300 facilitators, if you can imagine, and had a whole big place where we conducted all of this training. And I kept complaining. I said, "We don't measure anything beyond the learning they absorb while they're here. We never follow up." And I kept complaining about that. And the head of the training says, "Okay, why don't you create an evaluation system for us? And we'll put you in charge of a corporate wide task force. That's what happens to you when you complain sometimes is
Yeah. Yeah,
you
you solve it.
you make it better then.
Yeah.
And so I did, and so we reached out to a guy named Kirkpatrick, who had published some articles, and we thought, "This is our resource," but he says, I don't really work in that area. I just did some work for my PhD dissertation. I even got that concept from someone else." And I said, "So you have no standards, no case studies, no more detail than you got in those 4 articles?" He says, "I don't." He says, "I'm counting on people like you to make a difference." And so we did. And so we put structure around it, and we got into working in the learning and development space quite well. We published the first book on this in 1983. You were not born yet. Um,
Yes, I
we
was. I was definitely.
long time
But
ago.
thanks for the compliment.
Yes. So, uh, and it became the first book on training evaluation ever, and it was called Handbook of Training Evaluation and Measurement Methods. Hey, that took off, and, meanwhile, I'm already moving into head of HR, first head of learning and then head of HR, and then moved some different companies, and I wound up my career as president of a banking system. Um, but along the way, I used this methodology with our own teams, and it made a difference. It made a difference in getting budgets approved. It made a difference in keeping your budgets. It made a difference in making them better, making your projects better because it's process improvement. And it makes a difference to get the support that you need. But it made a difference in my career. And I got to tell you one more study, one more story about when I was head of HR for a banking group. I was employed as executive vice president for HR, and that banking system was growing, growing, and they acquired a lot of other banks. They, from an HR perspective, it was absolute mess because you've got benefit structures that need to be integrated and pension plans that were uh, of all kinds, and you had problems with retaining those people you're acquiring, and they hired me to fix that, and I fixed it, and we followed our process showing the ROI of every project we put in place. My partner in crime here was the chief financial officer, so we present this to the board saying, "Here's the problem, here's our solution, here's how it worked, here's the ROI." And they said, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Um, Showing the ROI from HR efforts. They
Uh-huh.
said the previous HR director talked about in jargon that we didn't even understand. And it said, you're doing nothing but talking the business with us." And so it helped me. I got promoted, and it wasn't long, to division president, and then later on became president of the group. But my point is, it helped to me in my career, all of my roles. Moving from training manager to HR is not easy, but
Uh-huh.
moving from HR to CEO is even more difficult. But
Uh-huh.
if you can show your business contribution, your business alignment, and your business language and your business mentality, you've got it. That's all it takes, and that's what we do with this methodology.
So it seems like in terms of the value of this methodology, so in terms of like your background, it seems like you have the engineer background anyway. You were studying this type of data and statistics. You got the question at the very opportune moment when you were working on your master's thesis, took those things together. Kirkpatrick came around and it's like, okay, well, maybe you can formalize some of this stuff. And then it's just as you continue to refine this methodology, it opened so many doors to you for your career from training to HR to becoming the president of a bank. That sounds to be like from yours. Is that did I capture your story
Yes,
accurately?
very good. Yes.
So, you started to address one of the questions I have for you is like, what's the value for consultants and coaches, particularly both? I would say a lot of my clients and the people I work with are external consultants. And it's like, why is it important for them? It's almost like, let's talk about the ROI for them and use the methodology to talk about like, what's the value for them to enhance their ability to measure the results of what they do.
Okay, great. See, as we started working with this, we saw it. This not only works in a learning and training environment, but it works with whatever you're doing. And OD was something that popped up quickly. the OD function, and that's usually a lot of consultants. We started working with consultants. They were attracted to our methodology. We teach people this process through certification. They come to want to be certified in this. So consultants begin to come, and it works so well in their space. So just imagine if you're a consultant, you're bringing something in, you're putting in a system or process or something, and you leave something there normally for them to pick up and go with. Um, so let's just follow the chain of value here. The first is how they react to what you're doing. You've got to have people to buy into what you want. You want them to see it as relevant, important, it's something that they are willing to implement and maybe recommend to others. And then they're learning something from you and what you're doing. That's the learning. They take away some things. And they're actually doing some things different now because of what you're doing. That's level 3. So we go reaction, learning, application. Doing something is application, but it's all for a purpose. You're delivering something that's affecting the business. On the broad terms, your output, quality, cost, and time are what you're influencing. That's at the top of any organization. Output is the work you do. The quality is the mistakes, errors, waste, and rework. And then you've got um, time is getting things done quicker. That's a lot of consulting efficient, like Lean, for example, does that. And then there's cost. You're sometimes looking at ways to reduce cost. So you're you're perfect for this as a consultant. And then convert that to money, compare it to the cost, and you show your client now the ROI of using you. If that's done in a credible way, so it's not only believable, but you can defend it, you just got your best strategic marketing advantage because others won't be doing that. So just imagine when you go into a project, you got your approach now, but say, I want to show you the impact of what I'm doing. Is that what you'd like to see? Well, of course they would. Now I'm going to show you the ROI of what I'm doing. That is what it's costing you, not just what you're paying me, but I'm costing you some money internally because I'm going to have people tied up with me. I'm going to put all of that cost in there. I'm going to show you the monetary value you're getting out of this. I'm going to show you the ROI doing that. Are you okay with that? You can imagine what the answer would be. Well, yes. No one else does that. And so we take it a step further. We now have some said, I, I want to guarantee an ROI. I want to guarantee that we'll deliver this ROI. Otherwise, you get your money back. Now, we've got a chapter in one of our books. It's about guaranteeing ROI. Our inspiration for that was SAP. We work with them to help guarantee one of their implementations of their system-wide enterprise systems. Actually, and one of those like 5 million, 10 million implementation for a system. They now will guarantee the ROI. And now that sets them apart from others. They're the largest business software company in the world, and they get there by delivering value. And so
So So in
we
terms of
can
the
do
difference, like the value, like I want to make sure I'm capturing everything that I heard you say because there's a lot in here. So it seems like from the beginning of your career, it started off with being able to justify, the budget that people are investing in you. It seems like that's one of the big benefits. A second benefit, based on your career and your experience, and probably now what you help tons of people do, is it really is a fast track to learning how to speak the language of business,
yes.
not the language of like HR jargon, that type of thing. And it sounds also like it opens other kind of career opportunities for internal people that they might not have considered. But I'm hearing something even more powerful in what you're saying here is that it adds a different layer of credibility that your clients would not naturally get from any other consultant is like, I'm somebody who delivers results. It sounds like it also is a competitive differentiation. And it also sounds like a risk reversal concern that a potential client might have is, I'm not just going to propose a solution, I'm going to set it up in a way that will, for sure give you an ROI. Like those seem to be pretty pretty solid benefits of investing in this type of methodology. Did I get that right, or is there anything I'm missing?
No, that's right. I would add this, because we're collecting data along this value chain, we see where things are working and not working. Um, so it's process improvement. by evaluating at these different levels all the way through the value chain, we deliver a better product at the end. In fact, there may be some things that I'm learning this time that I'm gonna use now next time that it's process improvement for my next project. So I would say one of the big reasons for doing this is to make your project better. Yes, it does help you for strategic marketing better than anyone else. It does help you gain support and get a sponsor. You'll be a consultant for life of that organization because they love what you do, and you make it risk-free for them because they know they're gonna get something from you worth a lot more than they're paying you.
So at the workshop you did at Disney, I still remember this example. So obviously it must have been really powerful. But the case study that you used with us, tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe I just am remembering it this otherwise. But I remember it was being something along sexual harassment, and what you had taught us around the different levels was really getting to the outcome, which is like not. It wasn't even just not getting reducing the number of sexual harassment incidences, but it was about the employer brand and the, a bunch of other things. Can you walk us through very clearly, like the
And
different levels using that particular example? Like level one is if you are brought in. Am I right? Did you use that case study
yeah,
or
yes, yes.
okay?
Alright, yes. So here's the issue. It was a healthcare system, hospital system, and they were having too many sexual harassment complaints. Some of those complaints turned into EEOC charges, and some of those turned into lawsuits. So it was costing this system, some money. But worse than that, it was, creating a hostile working environment, at least for some people. So you're getting turnover was quite high. People were leaving, and some of it was, not they're not meant to some of it was just harassment that's n not, aggressive, purposeful, but unintentional. And so and it's really a lot of in this case, a lot of physicians, not understanding what sexual harassment really what what it meant by sexual harassment. Uh, it's only harassment if it feels that way with the victim.
So
Um,
that's the level 2 is the understanding, the knowledge.
exactly, you're
So
right.
level
So
1 is the intervention. Level 1 was the intervention that you used, correct?
now, reactions level 1, how did they see this the our so the program was to prevent sexual harassment. That's what we're evaluating. Is this relevant? Yes. Is this needed? Yes. Is this important to us? Yes. Is this something I'm willing to make work? Yes. They knew that because there'd been some high profile cases that cost the hospital some money, but it also is tarnishing their image in the community. Hey, this is the Baptist hospital system. Baptists are not supposed to be doing this. And so you can imagine this is something they needed to stop and they want so this program was there. So reaction was making sure they saw value in what we're doing. Second is learning uh, what can constitute sexual harassment activity and what's our policy around this. Some not following the policy because they didn't even know it. And so learning. But then the big measure here is I think the next one, and that's are you eliminating the actions, the activity, the things that cause the complaint? Is a behavior change? And that's the big one there, changing your approach. And so, yes, that they the best data there was they did an anonymous survey with a 25% sample of the employees, basically asking them, "Is this happening in the workplace? Is this happening in the workplace?" And what it showed, and divided it both in sexual harassment activity and policy. And what they showed is that they both have improved. That's the best set of data, I think, in terms of, hey, it's going away. But now, from a business perspective, is it worth it? Let's keep going with it. One is, did it affect turnover? It did in a big way. Uh, People without this kind of process going on, I'm, I'm not leaving. So you've affected turnover. But then the complaints almost went away, and those were costing you a lot of money. So that level 4 is the turnover and complaints. But then this HR executive there and says, let's show executives that this is a good business decision here. This is really compliance, to be in compliance with the laws, but compliance pays off. So let's do the ROI. So the very high ROI, this is one of our published case studies published by the American Society for Talent. I mean, the Association for Talent Development used to be American Society for Training and Development. And it has over 1,000% ROI. You probably, when you saw that in that case study, you wonder, God, how can it be so high? But you've got a very expensive problem and a very inexpensive solution. And that's what happens. So that was telling the executives, not only is this a good thing from an image perspective, by the way, that image now is we put in a category of intangibles. We're not going to convert the image in the community at, to money. We're not going to convert their satisfaction at work now. We won't convert that to money. But those are two important impacts that we'll put in the intangibles. So not only you got now reaction, learning, application, impact, ROI, and intangible. Profile of 6 types, 5 levels of outcomes plus intangible. Intangible is our 4th level, but not converted to money. You always have that.
Yeah.
Things that are not easy to convert to money. So it's a marvelous story, a study to tell you what can be done and the power of what can be done.
What I loved about that story too is it for me, it was the simplicity of understanding what goes at what level, like the difference between the reaction learning. And then the other thing that I thought was very interesting and new for me is I learned the Kirkpatrick model in my previous life as an HR development person before I became an OD person. And it's just adding that extra perspective around the money. And it's like it really changed my perspective as a brand new OD consultant is like, hey, wait a minute, I'm here and I'm not an expense that is to be managed like I'm an investment, and I need to show my investment, and it changed my perception on, the value that I was bringing to the table. So I really appreciated that. When I work with my clients though, what I find interesting is they could if I ask them like the different levels, like, okay, so when it comes to this project or when you're pitching work with a client, can you talk at those different levels? They can define like level 1 and level 2 all day long. They might be able to like step into level 3, but they really struggle with art even from themselves or even to try to get the client to even articulate what even their level 4 goals might be, what the impact is that before they could even consider the ROI. Why is that such a sticking point? Why is that so hard for us to talk about the level 3, 4, or 5? And it's so easy for us to talk about the level 1 and 2.
Well, that's our big dilemma here because it's not that difficult to to see that, but it seems such a mystery to so many people. Uh, this is why we have the very first step in our model is to start with why. As a model behind my head, if you were looking in my studio here, start with why. Get clear with the impact in the beginning. See, in that sexual harassment, it was clear. We had we had those sexual harassment complaints. And again, you had the first level of complaint was a complaint file with the HR director. And then if it wasn't resolved to this person's satisfaction, they obviously have the right to go to EEOC, and that becomes a complaint that gets investigated. Even then, if it's not resolved to their satisfaction, they still have the right to go to the federal court and sue. Those are the court cases, the actual charges that are filed. I mean, the complaints that are filed. So you've got those are 3 different types, but all impacts. It's the complaints. So getting that was clear there. But see, when you put in things like culture, you know, if you think, well, what's our level 3? Well, it's your behavior. So culture is nothing but what people know,
Mhm.
think, and do. The do is the critical part. What do you want them to do? How do you want them to act and react? The actions you want to take. Clearly define that. You need to find it, and they need you to find it. So when you have a program, you're teaching them. You mentioned they can do level 1 and 2. But 2 is learning something. Level 3 is just an extension of that. Say, now we want you to use that. Okay, just put a goal around that. Put an objective around that. You want to do with every customer or with every colleague. You want them to do it every day. And what is that particular skill? So put some very clarity around that, letting them know what you expect out of them with that level 3. But then we think, and what happens when we do that? See, I like to look at level 3 and 4 together. You want them to be together because we're doing that level 3 for a consequence. Why are we doing that? And if somebody said, "Well, I'm not sure." You don't know why you're doing this? Well, we're doing it because we want that behavior. But why is that behavior important? Keep thinking, because it does it make things better? Am I getting more productivity? Am I saving time? Am I is it is it making me decide to stay with this organization? Think about those impacts. Get clear on those. Get clear on those up front because that's the why you're doing it now. If you put it up front, then you can say, now this is why we're doing this. We're not doing culture because we want you to behave different. We're doing culture because we need to be more productive. We need more sales. We need more whatever, or we need less of whatever. You got to get clear. That's the business connection. So we're uncomfortable sometimes in learning to go down that path. This makes us think like a business person, and we prefer not to. We prefer to think
Right.
the way we always think, and that gets us into trouble. I got to put my mind in the I could put my body in the shoes of that person's gonna pay for this, and that
And understand why they want it, I think, is the only way that you're gonna be able to be that investment. Like, I'm gonna give you a situation, and I'd love for you to speak into it. So one of the clients I was working with, she wanted my help because she was trying to land a conflict resolution training for a company that was like a government organization. They sold sonobuoys, and there were conflicts on the production floor. And so she's like, "Okay, how do I get this, like, up to 10,000 or something like that?" And I'm like, "But why are they doing it?" They're like, "It doesn't really matter. I just wanna do this. It's a 2-day thing." And her natural way of wanting to go in to land this client was to talk about, like, how many people, what do you want the learning objectives to be, and all that kinda stuff. And what I told her to do is go in and don't talk about that, talk about the why. Are they doing this? Like, what's going on in the organization? Like, what's it affecting? And what we uncovered through before she landed the work is that there were these conflicts on the production floor, and what was happening is it was leading to all these product defects, which was leading to their biggest customer about ready to cancel their contract and go to another go to their competitor, and that put the entire business at risk. It was a completely different if it was a completely different ball game. And so I struggle sometimes, like, trying to help my clients see, like, don't just say yes to the request, get to the why behind the request, because otherwise you don't even know if you're solving the right problem. Like, and you don't even know if these people are having conflicts because they just don't have the knowledge and skills, like going to the Mager model. Like, you don't even know if that's the problem. So how would you speak into this? Like, how would you, like, what tips would you give me or directly to my clients, because they have a chance to listen to you directly, on how they could handle these initial conversations, think like a business owner or the clients that are talking to them, and have the courage to push to these outcomes.
yes. I'll give you an example on that, leadership development. It's always a good one to look at. Um, there's a there's a couple of, ladies who wrote a book. They were in the Marine Corps as leaders, and they wrote a book called Spark, and it's about the leadership approach of the Marine Corps. They loved it. They worked it while they were in the Marines, and they wrote a book about it, and they created a company around it. Now, they wanted to make sure they delivered business value. That they went through our certification, and they changed their whole approach. It says we used to talk about the having great leaders and leadership skills that are so critical and so important. So our conversation now is, what is it about your business that's not doing as well as you'd like? What bothers you? Or if it's doing well, what are you going to do to make sure it continues to do well? Or take it maybe to even a higher level. What is when you get clear on those and say, do you think the their leadership capability of your team can get there? Do they need some help in getting there? And they almost always say, well, they might need some help. What do you got in mind? Well, maybe if we look at these kind of skill sets that can drive some of these measures, particularly if this measures involving other people, and most of them are. And so what what they tell me, the CEO of that company says, we're really not a leadership development company anymore. We're a business improvement company that just happens to have a leadership development tool. But it's so flexible that most of the conversation we have wind up with leadership is a solution because leadership is so powerful, so versatile. So we want to take that mindset change, just as your colleague was saying, let's get in there and talk about what their problems are and see if we can solve or change or improve those issues with what we're offering to them or what we can offer to them and see. But also be prepared to say, I don't think we can change that, but I know someone else who can because you need another solution. That's hard for them to do, but that's going to be rare probably. And even, we'll have people say, well, but we offer open enrollment programs out there. We've got leaders coming to our program. How do we do that? We say, well, tell them when they come to this program, bring 2 KPIs, key performance indicators that you want to change, that you'd like to change, you'd like to improve, but only if you can improve them using these competencies that we're going to be exploring with you. And they do that. If you think you can't change one of those, get another measure because we want you to have 2 measures here that you can improve using our competency. When you've done that, you've customized the program to them and their needs at the business level. They come with a business problem they want to tackle. They're not there to learn leader behavior anymore. They want to solve the problem. Leader behavior is the way we're going to get there. So it's transforming that dialogue, that
So
conversation.
I'm starting to see something that from what you're saying, and tell me if I've got this right, but it seems like there's this like positive flywheel that happens, and it's all around the idea of business acumen. And that in order to demonstrate the so it seems like business acumen is the goal. And by learning the ROI methodology, it's almost like a hack to accelerate your ability to develop the business acumen. But then the more you develop your business acumen, it enhances your ability to implement the ROI methodology. So it's almost like this reinforcing type of thing all around the whole concept of business acumen. And the only way that you're going to be able to show you're an investment versus an expense is to have clarity on to be able to speak the language of the business and participate in that. So I learn measurement and that grows my business acumen. I grow my business acumen and enhances my ability to do measurement. And then as I go about doing that, then I could see how do I improve this business? How do I improve the project? How do I improve the results?
Yes, exactly. That's right.
That is
It's so
fascinating.
powerful. I have to tell you, on Monday, 2 days ago, Patty and I, were meeting with the prison system in Georgia. It's the Georgia Department of Corrections. They're implementing a major, uh, culture project there. And it's from a company called Culture Partners, and they know how to do this well. They know our methodology. So when they met and started with this program, they got to the key results they wanted from the culture. And so you got a message that I was watching a program for the employees being trained with the culture, and he puts up and says the commissioner for the um, Department of Corrections there had this video and says, welcome to our culture alignment workshop. It says, we're taking this on to tackle 3 very important areas that we all probably can agree that we need to improve. One of them is retention. We've got a goal of improving our turnover rate, move it 10 percentage points down from where it is now. We know we have a high turnover. You know that we're going to create a great place to work. That's really intangible, but that's going to affect that turnover rate. We're going to also reduce incidents. We've got lots of incidents that happen here, and we're going to work to make sure we do the right things to get there and reduce those. We're going to reduce those by 10%. That's our goal. And then we're teaching you to think different, be creative, and make a difference in the organization. Look at different ways of doing things. Bring that creativity to make us a better place and show us where we can save money. And we're going to reinvest that. When you show us something we can save, we're not going to say, great, we're going to give that to someone else. We're going to reinvest it in something we need to in in the system here. And so that's they call that reinvestment of savings that's generated through this process. So he starts off with the end in mind. That's why we're here. And I
Huh.
thought that this is the way it's got to be done. It's not saying, hey, we're working on culture and it's so great. You're going to love this culture. It's going to make you feel good about it. You're going to feel good about coming to work and you're going to feel good about going home. Yes, yes. But here's why we're doing it. And it takes off. No one left that meeting saying, why are we doing this? But if you didn't do that, you could easily have people saying, why are we doing this?
So you're addressing an objection that a lot of my clients might have around the measurement. It's like, hey, I just want to drive meaningful impact. Like, even if I can't prove it, like, I just want to drive meaningful impact. Like, some of the lean consultants I work with is because lean has gotten so associated with cost savings that they kind of shy away from it because it's like, I just want to create these people centered organizations, these people centered learning organizations. How would you address that objection? Around, like, why I don't wanna talk about the cost savings, I wanna talk about the people and creating this positive culture, I'd just rather drive this impact even if I can't prove
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, lean is a good way to do that because you're teaching people how to find a faster, quicker way to do something normally. So you're saving uh, money. Just imagine if you've got a lot of little procedures here, it may be a procedure that takes 15 minutes, and I just shave 3 minutes out of that. And if I've done that and I've got literally hundreds of people doing that all day long, you add that up for a whole year, uh, and you look at the hourly wage rate, that's a lot of money. And you should thank me for being here because look what I'm doing for you. And that, that's the person saying this that you're talking about. Now let's go up to
Yeah, but
the
they're gonna say, "I don't wanna be associated with that. I wanna be associated with how I create this respect for people, this culture." Like, they don't wanna be associated with that, so they kinda push back on that one to say, "I just wanna drive this meaningful culture."
yeah. Well, uh, it would say, okay, well, let's make sure that the culture can make a difference. Uh, what culture you want? If you say, I want to make people to work together and appreciate each other and to form a team, and why? Or why would that make a difference? How would that help? And if you keep thinking, they know well, yeah, they probably going to stay in this organization. Yes, so we just affected retention, so turnover. So let's take that and let's see if there's a turnover problem. Now, if there's no turnover problem, then they don't need this. They're, they're staying there for other reasons, so you're not going to affect turnover. But what else would it do? Well, maybe they get more work done. Productivity, is this a problem? Uh, and you can look at the top of the organization. What is your key productivity? And you can see if is that a problem. And what you typically do is find something there that's going to say this is a problem here and that we can address, or it's a it's okay, but we can get a lot more. We can
S
make you better than the average out there. So
so
we're just
even
trying to get that convers if you wanna work in soft skills, that's fine. Let's just look at the value that delivers and make sure that they need them. Uh,
So it sounds like the clarity. So there's a whole thing here that seems like is like move away from the aspirational values and bring it down. If you could bring it down to the behavior, like what's the behavior you want to change? And then what's the impact of the behavior? You can create this, that you can create more. more clarity around what the impact is supposed to be in the why so that you can figure out the what when you can get beyond the aspirational. Like, I just want to create this type of human centric organization. It's like, well, what are the behaviors that people do in a human centric organization? And then and whose behaviors are we really trying to change? And if those behaviors change, then you can connect it to the business.
Yeah. And I'd
Okay.
say, and what if you have a human-centric organization, how does that affect things like retention, productivity, uh, errors, waste, rework, timeliness, efficiency, those kinds of measures. Um, it what we should be able to do is to show having a human-centric organization makes you more productive, um, makes you deliver better quality services, and makes you do more efficient work. That is, you can do it in a shorter period of time. And those are all measurable uh, values that are out there in the system, and you can convert those to money. So you can have an impact on that. Now you always have to show the impact that you're having from other influences. That's a part of our process. Is that when you have an effect on productivity or retention, you want to sort out what effect that you had with your program. That's a critical credibility issue. So otherwise, you can see. Uh, you wonder, well, did this cause this? And give an example. In the prison system, they told us about one project that saved itself $1 million, and and they started explaining how they're doing that. And I said, "Is there a chance that that would have been done anyway?" And they thought could have been. I said, "So we've got to sort out the effects of this. We
Right.
you got to have people telling us to what extent did this culture program cause us to do that? Give us a percent. 100% means it was the total reason, and 0 means it had no effect. Where are you with that percentage? That's called isolation by estimates, and then we're gonna adjust that for even just for the error of that estimation. That's part of the weeds process that we get into to make it credible. My point is, you if it's something worth doing, more than likely there's a business measure connected to it. The credible part is to connect to it in a credible way. And then when you convert to money, you also do that in a credible way. And right next to my head, if you were looking at the video, you see that make it credible, make it credible. That's what we mean there is that when you get to impact, you got the attention of your leaders, your top leaders. That they
Yeah.
latch in on that.
The top leaders, it's essential. Maybe other people like, I just want to have a happier workplace, but you still can quantify that. I think what's you're also bringing up is the difference between measuring the day-to-day results and measuring projects and the benefits of projects. And you're very clear on your website is you are about measuring projects in this and rather than like what finance might do and other regular KPIs, it's measuring the impact of projects on those day-to-day metrics. And I think that's another way to look at it as well is yes, we want to create this culture no matter what, we'll be looking at these measures, but it's like how when I put this intervention into play, what difference did it make?
Exactly. A good way to see that is with a balanced scorecard. People have a balanced scorecard tracking their key measures. And we're often asked, how do you relate to that? Well, we work with projects that's going to improve the measures that are on your scorecard. If you got a measure not doing well, you always say, okay, what can we do? That leads to a project. And now you're going to evaluate your project based on how well you've improved that measure. Maybe it's a measure that's doing okay, but you might could tackle it to do better. So what we're doing is measuring those. We're influencing those measures that are on your scorecard. We're not putting a scorecard in place, although we could do that, but that's not our core business. Others are doing that and doing it quite well. And so what we tackle is projects to improve the measures that are on your scorecard already, on your
Well,
dashboard.
and the benefit of even looking at it through the scorecard, that could be another hack into the business acumen is if it's a business scorecard, it will show the leading to the lagging metrics, like, and to understand the difference and connecting the dots, like, everything makes a difference. I just wanna bring up one point before I move to the other objection that people might have around measurement, and I think when it comes to the work that we do, there is a revenue generating side. It's not just always the cost. Like when I think about, if I reduce hassles in the workflow, like this is my Disney background. We had a lot of efforts reducing hassles in the workflow. And the whole purpose was to impact guest satisfaction. And specifically the metric around intent to repeat and recommend. Because there is the research to show if you could hit the intent to repeat and recommend, that directly translates to revenue. And so there is something too about even like a process improvement, like with where lean has concerns, or is it they don't want to just be on the cost side, they want to be on the value creation side. But it's like you think about all the innovations that could come out as this other whole thing. So I want to balance that out is it's not just cost is where the money is, but it's also revenue, by if I help break down silos, that's going to lead to new synergistic ideas that could lead to a new product line, that could lead to, additional revenue, found revenue.
Yes, you're right. So for in businesses where we have sales and revenue, we have a lot of projects in that area, and so there, the value add is the profit from that. If you get a new account, it's the lifetime value of that new account, and you usually have that number already calculated somewhere. If it's just sales, it's the margin on the sale that the value that we've added there. But even there, it's sometimes we can reduce the sales cycle time. That's going to help us too get more sales, or we can improve the profit per sale. Um, or sometimes it's customer complaints, and that's going to be a cost avoidance now because we're avoiding the cost of having to deal with that complaint. So, yes, you get to the monetary value that we put in the calculation. You're getting to the point here. It's going to either be profit or cost avoidance.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that. That's what goes into this. We work a lot in government, just like that prison system on Monday. Most of our work now is in non-business, and that's interesting how it's evolved over the years. In a non-business, they don't have profits, but they do have lots of cost of goods. The profit making is where you have sales, um, and there, even there, still the majority of our projects are in the cost savings. Like the retention is a big thing for a lot of projects. That's the cost avoidance. We're avoiding the cost of turnover, or complaints, or delays, or bottlenecks, rework. So all your quality measures are cost avoidance. We're trying to avoid that. Your time savings, we're avoiding the cost of taking so long to do this. Um, so yes, so you're working both. If you got revenue generating as a Disney, you got a lot of things to make those customers happy, so that they do promote you and repeat and recommend, as you say. That's the two things you want there.
So I think I kind of know how you're going to answer this objection, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is some people might say, "But Jack, I don't want to measure an ROI because it might reveal that my program or service didn't work." What would you say to that person?
Hey, that's our number one barrier, by the way, that keeps people from going down this path. So I first I'd say, well, uh, the key is being proactive with this. Let's just think you're delivering a service now, and you haven't been asked for ROI, and so should you go down that path? And I'd say to the my client, hey, I'd like to show you the ROI for this. We think it's adding value more than it's costing you, and you think it does too. But let's see if it is. And and if not, what's keeping it from working? And now I'm proactive.
Uh-huh.
And if I find out, hey, this is not adding the value, and it's breaking down in a couple points. It's usually not what you have to offer. It's not the content that's causing the problem, but the implementation of it. And that's an important point because uh, if you're selling something that inherently doesn't add value, then you're fraudulent because it doesn't add value. You're trying to sell it. That happens all the time, I think. But if you think it adds value, you know it adds value, but you're afraid it might not add value here, but you'll know. And it usually breaks down with something that's not you. It's not your reflection of what you've done. Something wasn't done that they were supposed to do. But and now you can correct it. See, but now if you have to report this is negative because of this is happening, we're going to fix it, correct it, and go forward. Now, as a purchaser of services, I think I would hug your neck. I'd say, my gosh, no one's ever done this. You come in and show the value of what you have, you find it's not working, you're going to correct it. Most don't want to do that. You're not going to get fired by revealing, hey, it's not working, and here's what we can do to correct it. You just help them get something much better. So the danger is waiting for them to ask. If you wait for them to ask for it and you hadn't planned it, you got three things that happen to you. One is they want it quickly. You remember my very first one. I wanted to take 6 months. And he said, no, I wound up having to do it in a month. You're going to have a short timeline. I was lucky to get a month with this person. But so you won't have enough time to get to the data. And that request usually comes after you're done with your project and you didn't plan to deliver this value. So if you didn't plan for it, uh, you say, "Uh-oh, I didn't start with the business in mind measure." So shame on you, but we didn't do it. We didn't know this. But um, so that's why you don't want to do it. But see, you've got to so whatever you do is going to probably not be um, your best. That is, you're going to have to deliver something, or you can't deliver anything at all. That's working against you. The second thing that happens is that you're now being defensive. You're defending something. You want to be on the offense. You want to drive this yourself. You want to bring up the ROI. Don't wait for them to bring it up. And the third thing happens is that you let ROI get on their agenda and you need to keep it on your agenda. You don't want it on their agenda. Keep it on yours. You want to drive this bus yourself. And
Ah.
I'll give you a quote that comes from Patty. Patty is my partner in crime here. She's the smart one. She's our CEO. And she says, when it comes to delivering results, hope is not a strategy, luck is not a factor, and doing nothing is not an option.
Mm.
Things have changed in terms of our accountability requirement. Change is inevitable. Progress we make is optional. It's up to you.
So if I'm gonna like kind of wrap up a lot of the stuff we talked about, is it seems like there's the ROI methodology, and then it seems like there's the ROI mindset. And I feel like what I got away from my experience in working with you all of those years ago is it's not that I have to do like level 5 measurements like in all my projects. Like at Disney, I was on the hook for 2. But the thing is how I approach my work is I want to approach my work as if I could, like that I will be able to do this. And I think about like the approach I do for my discovery meetings. Now, it's really all about beginning with the why. Like what's the intent? What's the goal? And what's the ROI you're looking for? Like I do that all the time. This is what I teach my clients all the time. But it's also it's how I think about the brand positioning. Like when you talk about what you do, you talk about it as like I wouldn't encourage my clients to say stuff like, "Oh, I help, leaders improve." Like what does that mean? Like I help companies scale to their next level by building their first leadership bench or something that you lead with the outcome. And it seems like the mindset is as important as the methodology. I don't know if I'm hearing that right, but that's what I'm
It
gathering.
is. You're exactly right. I remember the first time I heard that comment was I had a group of graduate students at a university in Montreal, and I had one day with them. And so at the end of that, this person said, um, "You're not really teaching us to do an ROI study. You just want us to think ROI." I said, "That's it. Think of
Mm.
it. Mindset." Now, our biggest project we probably ever had, and we've had some big projects, um, is right now, and based on what you're just talking about, the leader in Saudi Arabia, the crown prince there, MBS they call him, Mohammed bin Salman, and he says, "I want everyone in government to think ROI." And what he's thinking is our methodology. He's seen a slide of ours, that's got our value chain in it. And he says, I want everyone in government, that's 1.5 million people. I want them to think ROI on everything they do. A new project, new procedure, new regulation, new whatever you're doing. We want you to ultimately think the benefits versus the cost. But think how you get there with this whole value chain here. So we've got to educate 1.5 million people on changing their mindsets. That's our big project there. And through our
Wow.
partner in Saudi Arabia, we're doing that. I was there with them, mapping out the strategy for that. And we're hearing from that because they're now saying as they go out for put an RFP for projects that says, by the way, we want you to show the ROI of this. We want you to use the methodology from the ROI Institute. You can imagine that's driving us crazy here because we, we're having to respond through our partners there in the Middle East with all these things. But it's all about changing your mindset. And that's just what we're doing. ROI thinking. When we work with small businesses, they're not going to spend a lot of time on ROI studies, but if I can get them to think ROI and everything you do, you have a marketing tool, marketing campaign, think ROI, some new technology you're buying something for your office, think that. Go through that mindset. That's
Hmm.
what we want.
That's powerful. So, if people are listening and saying, I'm inspired, I want to take some first steps, like what are some of the first steps and how can the ROI Institute support them on those first steps?
Well, we could just say if you want to reference, we could take something like that consultant scorecard. That's one of our books, and we'd be happy to give your clients a copy of one of those books.
If they
Um, w-
reference, if we come up with a reference code that they listen to the Consulting Matters podcast, they can get that book for free.
yes, just send us your shipping address. We ship it to you, um, hard copy. I mean, print copy,
Wow.
or we can send it e-copy. Hey, that gives you some detail, but we have 1-day workshops. We call those boot camps. You can go there. And if you really want to get into it, if you're a consultant and you're committed, hey, I want to go down this path. I want to learn how to do this. We have ROI certification. This is teaching you how to do this. We got blended learning versions. We've got on-demand versions. We've got in all kinds of ways to learn this. I'll be teaching one in the Washington D.C. area next week, and it's 3 days of blended learning. They have to take the 1 day on-demand overview, and we go through 3 days there with them
Are you gonna be
at
in
the
Florida anytime soon by any chance?
where
Florida, Orlando?
yes, Orlando next 2 weeks from now. We're in
Ooh,
Orlando at the on the campus of University of Central Florida. We make it to a lot of campuses. The one next week is University of Maryland, and at UCF in Florida. Um, they are they got a lot of their faculty and a lot of their graduate students into this program because they're they s- and it's a lot of it from the Florida school system. The Florida school system has been a huge user of this methodology. We've had 5 internal certifications just for the K through 12 school system there in Florida. So a lot of great success stories. How it really makes a difference. So we're in Orlando. That's the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is a blended learning version as well. We do some online after the program with you, and then you got an on demand 1 day. So we'll be there in
and
Orlando.
and people can find out about all of these programs at your website. I assume it's roiinstitute.com?
Not debt, not excuse me,
Not .com,
not
.net,
.com, .net.
.net,
Someone
okay.
someone sit is waiting to sell the .com to us. They they've had it for 20 to 30 years, I guess. They keep reminding us that, we can sell this to you. It's too late now. We've got so much branding around .net.
I
We
can
may buy it
imagine.
someday just to take the confusion out because you go there, they basically got some of our stuff up, and I don't know what it does, but anyway, it's .net. So,
Perfect. Okay, thank you for the clarification. So we
yes.
talked about a lot of different things as it relates to your background and how you fell into the ROI methodology. We got into what the methodology is, the benefits, we overcame the objections, And we talked about so many different things that people can do to get started. Is there anything else that you want to tell me? And I'm just not asking the right questions.
Well, first, you can do this. We try to make. Uh, some people say this is complex. This has got numbers and it's got steps and methodology, and it's a lot of work. Not really. We keep the math. We try to keep it to fourth grade math. Fourth grade math was tough. You remember that?
Hmm.
But we try. I can have an ROI study here that will be accepted by your chief financial officer and never go beyond fourth grade math. Now that hurts when I got a master's degree in statistics and an undergraduate in math along with my engineering degree. So I love math, but you don't need to love math to do this. You don't need to be in finance and accounting to do this. We take a formula out of that field and we use it. It's easy to work with, and it's step by step. It's like a drop down menu. So some people say, "My God, that looks too complex. I need something a little simpler." Well, but to get it credible, you're going to have to work at it a little bit. And
Yeah.
so be patient, but it'd be one of the best investments you ever had. If not, if you come through our process, you don't think it's worth it, we give you a complete refund on
Wow.
anything you've paid us.
You are so generous. Like, this time has been so meaningful to me, as you've influenced so many different things, but I do feel like your that training that you did almost 30 years ago, like, I know for sure it's, like, infused my approach, and I know I passed it on to other people, and, you've been a big part of, like, what I would say, like, this, like, chain of impact that's going on that I really appreciate. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for your generous offer of the book giveaway, which I'll get more information from you separately and I'll put it all in the show notes. And your link to your website. And I think that's it. So anything
And
else before we
I
wrap up?
I don't mind having a phone conversation. You've got an issue, you got a problem, you got something you wanna talk about, we'll do that all the time, so we'd love to. And I wanna thank you for, taking something that happened so long ago and using it and making it work. When you teach a group of people, you did sometimes and you don't follow up to see if they've done what they're supposed to, you wonder if you did have an impact, but in your case, we certainly did. And
Hmm.
so, um, I remember when you write a book, and we've written over 100 of them, you wonder if people read it. And, the stats are just amazing about how people don't read the books. They buy it. The book sales is no indication at all, hardly, of what people read, let alone what they actually do with what they read. So I applaud you for taking something and running with it and making it work in your world because that's really what we want to do, and that's what Disney wanted you to do. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it was so meaningful for me to have Jack on the show. So, as I mentioned, he is one of my grounding influences behind the positioning work that I do with my clients. And it was so special for me to be able to honor his contribution. So, if I've played any role in helping you find the strategic frame for what you do, you can absolutely thank Jack. So, in terms of next steps, I've got three for you. Definitely head on over to the ROIinstitute.net. I'm going to give the links in the show notes below. But when you get there, you're going to see a ton of free resources. And don't forget, if you go to the contact form on their site and let them know you heard Jack on my show, he's going to send you his book, The Consultant Scorecard, for free. So definitely head on over there. You're going to definitely learn exactly how you could start mastering this ROI methodology. And number two, what I really want you to do is keep in mind the real power of the ROI methodology is the ROI mindset. And there's ways that you can start cultivating it now. So I got a reflection challenge for you. So I want you to look at the work that you've already done with your clients, either formally or informally, either formally or informally. And I want you to pull the lens back beyond the tactics or the methods that you use. And I want you to see the journey of transformations your clients go through. So look at the recommendations and the rave reviews you've gotten. And I want you to see past the compliments like, oh, you're so easy to work with, or you gave such great advice, and start to see the real outcomes your clients get only because they work with you. And finally, if you want to implement a partnership based ROI infused approach to landing clients, enrollment is officially open for my Impact and Income Accelerator. So this is a live group coaching program. It runs through October 14th to December 2nd. You're going to get a ton of things in the group. You're going to get live group coaching sessions, one-on-one coaching with me. You're going to get templates, tools, all kinds of things. And I'm going to give you all of this so you can master your ROI mindset and apply it directly to how you land clients. So this is the secret to making more money through making a bigger difference. So here's the urgency. Definitely get in on the early bird discounts. And the best thing is if you're one of my private clients, this program is free for you. So if you've been on the fence thinking maybe you want to work with me one-on-one, now is the time to jump in. So head on over to my website at betsydordan.com. You could either learn more about the accelerator or book a call with me. That's the easiest way. So that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss my future episodes. If you found it helpful, please send it to a colleague who will also find it helpful. And until next time, thanks so much for listening.